Okay, everybody, we're going to give it a few minutes so more people can join. Until then, let us know in the chat where you're from. Say hello. We're always happy to hear where people are from. I know Sharon especially likes to see where people are from. It's always inspiring. You're all so far flung.
True. Very true.
You'll be seeing Sharon in a few moments once I make my introduction. Wow, lots of people. Okay, and you're still coming in. I'll give it another minute. Okay, well, let's get started while many of you are still joining us. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Uh, Thank you for joining us. I'm James Shaheen, Tricycle's editor, and it's good to be here with you for this special post-election event with Sharon Salzberg. As many of you know, Sharon is co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts. She's one of the early teachers of mindfulness meditation in this country and a best-selling author. Her most recent title is Real Life, The Journey from Isolation to Openness and Freedom. You can find a link to the book and to her online courses in the chat. After a teaching and a guided meditation, we will go to a Q&A. Everyone is on mute for now, but we'll ask you to unmute when it's time for questions. You can ask questions either by raising your virtual Zoom hand, and we'll ask you to unmute, or you can also post your question in the chat window, and I'll read them aloud, or Sharon will pick them out. This session is being recorded so that we can share it with people who cannot attend. You're in various time zones, and especially people in Australia and New Zealand have asked that they get recordings. Hi, Sharon. I'll hand this over to you now. Welcome, and thank you for doing this for us.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. I'm so happy to be with you all. Um, Let me just get myself together. Okay. Um, it is very exciting for me always to read where all these people are signing in from. You're all in different time zones, and I really thank you for coming together in this way. So I'd like to start just by um, looking a little bit at the word dharma, Dharma, which from the Sanskrit language is usually translated, very commonly translated as the Buddha's teaching or the laws of nature, the truth of things. But another meaning of the word dharma is that which supports us, that which sustains us, that which we rely on. What are we counting on? And I think a lot about that time, the beginning of the pandemic, when I went up to Barre, Massachusetts for what I was convinced was a 2 week stay till the whole thing blew over. And at some point, my biggest reflection was about that word dharma, like what's holding me together, like plans were completely disrupted. The retreat center, which I co-founded in 1976, uh, had to close, and I wondered. My thought was, I just want to make it to 50 years. Let's just make it to 50 years. No idea if we'd ever reopen, and it was really entering the unknown. So I thought, what am I counting on? What's sustaining me? And I came to a really deep reflection. I came to very much a sense of uh, I'm trying to fix my microphone for those of you who are having some trouble. Seems okay. So I don't know. Um, I came to certainly an appreciation of uh, my own practice, of the methods, the techniques were things I could rely on, and certain teachings from the Buddha, which were hard to access in reality, but which I absolutely believed completely were true. And that was things like um, hatred will never cease by hatred, hatred will only cease by love. This is an eternal law. And I realized those were the things that I actually was sustained by. Um, and it also reminds me of something I've written in several books because it was so meaningful to me, um, which is that I had read somewhere that after the atom bomb dropped in Hiroshima, even further devastation and despair spread throughout because this rumor was spreading that grass and trees and flowers would never grow again, that the laws of nature themselves had exploded. There was nothing intact, there was nothing whole anymore. That those laws of nature had exploded along with the bomb, and that as terrible as conditions were, once that rumor was dispelled and people came to see that, yes, grass and trees and flowers would grow again, then they had a different ability to go on. There was a different kind of resilience. And so I think of that too when I think of what sustains us. Like something is intact, something is whole, something has not exploded, something has not been destroyed, even in circumstances we find quite adverse and enormously challenging. So that also brings me to a consideration of the word equanimity in the Buddhist teaching, which is a very tough concept to try to unpack, to really understand. My first teacher, as I've often mentioned, was S.N. Goenka. My first retreat was in 1971, January of 1971, where I began meditating. And the teacher, S.N. Goenka, used to go around all the time saying, be equanimous, be equanimous, be equanimous. And we used to whisper to one another, is that a word? What does that word mean? I never heard that before. And the form of it, of course, equanimous is a little strange for us, but even the form of equanimity is a little strange for us because it sounds like indifference or coldness, but it's really not. It's not meant to be that. So it means balance, and it's the balance born of wisdom. It means having perspective on things. As we try to make a difference, for example, having the perspective, having the wisdom that not everything happens at once. Sometimes we really are just planting a seed. It may take a very long time. The perspective that we're not in control of the universe. We would like to be. And I, frankly, I once said in front of a group, if I were in charge of the universe, it would be a lot better world. And someone in the group protested. They said, are you sure? And I said, I am really sure it would be so much better. But guess what? This is the reality of things. Um, it's not that way. But that doesn't mean apathy or giving up or not trying. It means having perspective. It actually helps compassion because we don't get so frustrated and impatient. We have wisdom. So equanimity means wisdom coming to bear. And it also has a certain meaning of holding many truths at once, having a heart and mind big enough so that we can take in the dark and the light all at the same time, that they're both true. If we look at challenges and suffering and restriction and things like that, that may well be true and very important to open to. but there's also possibility, and there's movement, and there's flow, and there's community, and there's the force of love. That's also true. If we only look at the suffering, it's a very partial understanding. It's an important understanding, but it's very partial because we're devastated and we're exhausted and we can't move in any way. If we only look at what's bright and possible and wonderful, we're floating above, some very real circumstance and we're not connected. So we need both. And one of my examples of the word equanimity is from the time I went to Parkland, Florida, within a year after the school shooting there at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and everyone in the group I was teaching had been affected in some way by the shooting. And there was a young woman there named Samantha, who I now quote all the time, whose mother was a teacher at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and she wasn't hurt or killed, but it was a terrible day for everybody, and the whole community was really traumatized. So Samantha raised her hand and she said, I'm having a really hard time here because I'm having a wonderful day. It's wonderful to be with this community, to be learning these tools. I've felt for a long time I needed tools. Um, and I know the only reason this day is happening is because that horrible thing happened. And I don't know how to get over that in order to appreciate this. And I said to her, I don't know that we ever get over it, but we learn to hold them both at once. And that's called equanimity in the Buddhist tradition. We talked about the yin yang symbol where there's, that squiggly part that's all light and there's a circle of darkness inside it. And there's the squiggly part that's all dark and there's the circle of light within it. We learned to hold them both at once, and that's called equanimity. So I next saw Samantha maybe 6 months later or longer. And I said, Hey, Samantha, remember that conversation we had about the quality of equanimity? And she said, Not only do I remember it, I think about it every single day of my life. She said, That's my North Star now, is learning how to hold it both at once. And so, those of us who do have these tools of meditation know there is, for example, mindfulness. And I'll talk about that in a minute. I want to read this poem, one of the many poems that are going around that are often helpful. I don't know the title of it. So for all the people who are going to write in the chat, what's the title? I'm sorry, I don't know. The author of the poem, put it up on Facebook. I think the evening of November 5th or on November 6th. Her name is Sharon Harkin, CHELAN HARKIN. And this is the poem. It's when the earth shakes and foundations crumble that our light is called to rise up. It's when everything falls away and shakes us to the core and awakens all of our hidden ghosts that we dig deeper to find once inaccessible strength. It's in times when division is fierce that we must reach for each other and hold each other much, much tighter. Do not fall away now. This is the time to rise. Your light is being summoned. Your integrity is being tested, that it may stand more tall. When everything collapses, we must find within us that which is indomitable. Rise and find the strength in your heart. Rise and find the strength in each other. Burn through your devastation. Make it your fuel. Bring forth your light. Now is not the time to be afraid of the dark. So that's Sharon Harkin. So, someone put it up on the Facebook post. Thank you. Mindfulness. If we're trying to open to both the dark and remembering the light, one of the key qualities, of course, is mindfulness. I think of this story, which I've also written about several times, about this woman, Kate Braestrup, who's a chaplain with the Forestry Service in Maine. And she wrote a story about this time she was called to sit with these parents of a 6-year-old child who was lost in the woods. And later the child was recovered and was fine. But here's the beginning, of their time together. And the mom said something to her like, isn't it great that the Forestry Service has somebody that they could send to sit with me to keep me from freaking out? And Kate Braestrup said, actually, they sent me to sit with you while you freak out. And that's different. She called it a healing ministry or healing presence. And that's reminded me very much of mindfulness, which isn't a practice that we do to avoid uncomfortable feeling. If I were in charge of the universe, maybe that would be the case, but it's not the way things work. We feel everything, the joy and the sorrow, and we have to allow for the dignity of every feeling. I'm not at home right now. I'm in New York City, but when I was teaching so much during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, apparently I was saying the same thing over and over again, and people were sending me mugs that would have those sayings on them. Um, and one of the mugs said, some things just hurt. Some things are painful. And it's not because we have a bad attitude or we're thinking wrongly or we need to correct our way of um, thinking. Some things just hurt. What we don't want is extra suffering, where something is difficult, it's challenging, it's painful. And then we add to it a sense of isolation. I'm the only one who ever feels this. A sense of permanence. This is all that I will ever feel. Kind of reifying, identifying with it. This is the real me. Nothing else that comes and goes counts. And all the many things. We sometimes define mindfulness as uh, an invitation to look for the add-ons. Just look for the add-ons, because it's not the experience itself, the feeling, the thought pattern, the sensation, the situation that is so much the place we work. It's the holding environment, right? How much presence are we bringing to bear, and balance and compassion, kindness toward ourselves in what we are. uh, I just got a message to confirm I don't want to speak in French anymore. I don't. If anyone heard me speak French, it was very exciting because I don't speak French. Um, this is the nature of Zoom. Um, that's never happened to me before. So, we're working with how we are with what's coming up. That's sort of the venue, that's the place where mindfulness happens and where it's very, very powerful. We can experience whatever comes up with greater clarity, presence, balance, and kindness toward ourselves, right? And that's a tool we actually have. We also have tools like the practice of loving kindness. That's like looking for the light, remembering the possibility. I call it really the stretch. It's not trying to force yourself to feel something you don't actually feel. It's not trying to pretend in any way, but it's being willing and even courageous enough to use our attention differently and just see what happens. When we, for example, think about ourselves, if we are in the habit of like at the end of the day, sort of evaluating ourselves, like, how did I do today? And if we're in the habit of pretty well only remembering, even obsessing about the mistakes we made and what we did wrong and how terrible we are over and over and over again, what happens if we spend a little time wishing ourselves well instead of going through that list of faults one more time, right? It doesn't mean we never look at them, but if it's exclusively what we look at, our world is shut down. It's very narrow. Let's just see what happens when we offer ourselves these phrases of loving kindness. May I be safe. May I be happy. The sense of blessing. What happens when we look at someone we tend to encounter many times in our lives? You know, do they play some role, some service in our lives? And we don't tend to really look at them. We tend to look through them. We objectify them. We discount them. What happens when, in effect, we look at them instead of through them by offering these phrases of loving kindness to them? We may not even know their name or anything about them, but what happens? And very challenging to us, you know, what happens when we cultivate a sense of compassion, not weakness, you know, not giving in, not succumbing, not giving up our values, none of that, but actually a sense of our lives are connected. Those who we we find difficult, challenging, even terrible, although we don't go there right away. Um, you know, what happens just to acknowledge that sense of interconnection instead of going through that list of horrible behavior one more time? You're not denying it and you're not trying to pretend it's not there, but there can be a different sense of realization, of connection, not liking somebody at all. And the one thing I also want to say about loving kindness is that it's not a mandate for action. You know, people have asked me forever, you know, if I were to cultivate loving kindness or compassion for someone, does that mean I have to give them more money? Doesn't that mean I have to let them move back in? Doesn't that mean, someone asked me once, I have to visit them in prison, even though the reason they're in prison is that they abused me so badly? Um, does it mean I have to stop fighting their agenda? No, it's not a mandate for action. It means we want to free our own hearts from the burden of fear, which is what they say the Buddha taught loving kindness is the antidote to fear. We want to free our own hearts from the burden of incredible fear and hatred because it will burden us. So this takes a lot of investigation. If you're interested in offering loving kindness or compassion to those you find difficult, and it has to be because you want to, not because you feel forced to, because you have to really feel out what does it mean, you know, and what does it not mean, so you don't feel like you're suckered into something that's going to leave you weaker. I really don't believe it will. And I'll also say, since we do loving kindness practice with the silent repetition of certain phrases like may I be safe, may I be happy, and so on, sometimes if we're offering loving kindness to someone who's difficult, we have to change the phrases. Like I've had one student said to me they wanted to, that's an important point, offer loving kindness to their mother who in their childhood had been horribly abusive, but they wanted to. And they said the only phrase they could use was may be free of hatred. That they could say, and the measure of success in that practice is actually being able to do it. Not a great rush of gushy feeling, but actually being able to do it. So sometimes we have to change the phrases. That's fine. You know, we can be creative if you want to. So I want to lead a practice session now. We're going to do some mindfulness and move to loving kindness. I don't think we'll obviously have time for the range of those we might want to offer loving kindness to. So it's just one example of doing that practice. And if you're interested, of course, you can pursue it and see where it leads you, where you want to take it also. Okay. So we're going to sit together. You can get comfortable. Close your eyes or not. And we'll start with some mindfulness practice. You can start just by listening to the sound of my voice or other sounds. Of course, we like some sounds and we don't like others, but we don't have to chase after them to hold on or push away. Just let them come, let them go. Unless you are responsible for responding to the sound, you can just let it wash through you. And bring your attention to the feeling of your body sitting, whatever sensations you discover. See if you can feel the earth supporting you. Feel space touching you. Usually we think about touching space. We think about picking up a finger and poking it in the air. But space is already touching us. It's always touching us. We just need to receive it, feel it. Bring your attention to your hands and see if you can make the shift from the conceptual level, let go fingers, to the world of direct sensation, picking up pulsing, throbbing, pressure, whatever it might be. You don't have to name these things, but feel them. And at the same level, see if you can bring your attention to the feeling of your breath, the actual sensations of your breath. At the nostrils, at the chest, at the abdomen, wherever you feel them most distinctly. Just the normal, natural breath. You don't have to try to make it deeper or different. Breath is our refuge, it's our anchor. It's a place where we can actually just rest. See if you feel one breath. without concern for what's already gone by, without leaning forward for even the very next breath. Just this one. If you like, you can use a quiet mental notation like in, out, or rising, falling to help support the awareness of the breath, but very quiet. So your attention's really going to feeling the breath, the sensations of the breath, one breath at a time. And if images or sounds or sensations or emotions should arise, but they're not very strong, if you can stay connected to the feeling of the breath, just let them flow on by. You're breathing. It's just one breath. If they are strong, however, joy or sorrow, delight, fear, whatever it might be, see if you can simply recognize this is what's happening right now. You don't need to judge it. You don't need to add on to it isolation or permanence. Just this is what's happening right now. See how much balance you can bring to bear, how much of that healing ministry you can bring to bear, whatever is arising for you. And then see if you can return your attention to the feeling of the breath. And we'll do some loving kindness practice for the rest of the session. The practice is done by the silent repetition of certain phrases. So those phrases are like the centering point rather than the breath for us. We silently repeat the phrases over and over again, offering them to ourselves, to others, finally to all beings everywhere. It's not a practice where you're trying to force a feeling or conjure up a feeling you don't have, but we're gathering all our attention behind one phrase at a time. And we'll see what happens. When your attention wanders, it's the same skill set. We learn to let go gently and simply return. You don't have to judge having wandered or feeling you're not doing it right or anything. We let go and we start over, and we let go and we start over. And that's the muscle that we're cultivating. So the first recipient of loving kindness is ourselves. Common phrases. You may already have phrases you use that are different. That's totally fine. But common phrases are things like, may I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. Live with ease means the things of day to day life, like livelihood or family, may not be such a struggle. May I live with ease. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. You can repeat your phrases over and over again with enough space and enough silence so that it's a rhythm that's pleasing to you. The feeling tone is gift giving, offering, or blessing. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease, or whatever phrases you're using. Now, see if you can call to mind someone that you care about a lot, especially somebody who's maybe helped you directly, but maybe not. Maybe you've never met them, but they've inspired you from afar. The texts say this is the one who, when you think of them, you smile. Is there a being? Could be an adult, could be a child, could be a pet. When you think of them, it just lifts your spirits. And if so, bring them here. Get an image of them, say their name to yourself, get a feeling for their presence, and offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. May you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. Even if the words don't seem perfect, they're carrying the heart's energy, so they're serving us. And someone that you know is struggling, who's having a difficult time right now, bring them here and see what happens as you offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. May you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And then all beings everywhere, all people, all creatures, all those in existence, near and far, known and unknown. May all beings be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze, and we'll end the meditation.
Thank you, Sharon. Sorry
It's okay.
to
I have my
startle
own
you.
volume way up, so I'm like,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, some people are having difficulty hearing you. Most apparently not, but if you could speak up a little, maybe that would help. I'm not sure exactly what the issue is, but we do have some time for a Q&A, and you can either put your question in the chat, or you can raise your Zoom hand and we'll call on you to unmute. So, any questions are welcome now. Okay, so why don't we start with Karen Leduc? Why don't you unmute yourself?
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. And I love and appreciate all of your work, Sharon. Um, and I love tricycle as well. So thank you. My question is, so I'm in a meditation group with a bunch of people, and we are all white, privileged people. And I'm struggling a little bit with what feel I'm trying not to use a spiritual bypass with like, it's all going to be okay, when I also work with underprivileged children and immigrant children. And I feel like my life's probably going to be okay. Um, but I don't know that their lives are going to be as easy. So just my question is, what can you speak to anything about that? Like, uh, how we can be aware of not spiritual bypassing.
Well, I think the temptation to do spiritual bypassing is very strong because it's very comforting, like, but that's what I meant by saying only looking at the light, and not opening up to the very real suffering or darkness that may be present in a circumstance, even if not for oneself so much personally. But I think everything we do to foster a sense of interconnection is really crucial, both within ourselves, and an understanding, and also just expressing it. It doesn't have to be blaming or refuting someone else's point of view, but just bringing forth what is a very real um, sense of uh, connection, because it's the truth of things. It's not fanciful. It's not made up. And um, one of the things I appreciate about our time is that it's not just spiritual understanding that brings us to a sense of interconnection. Science brings us there, and economics brings us there, and environmental consciousness certainly brings us there. Um, what happens over there doesn't nicely stay over there. It ripples out. And so, one of my main efforts in teaching always is to bring forth that sense of interconnection in a lived way. Even when I go into or have gone into a organization or company to teach, one of my main questions is always, um, who else has to do their job well for you to do your job well? Because guess
Mm-hmm.
what? We are counting on a lot of people. And if you commute to work, you ever spare a moment to think of that, car mechanic or train engineer, and if you don't commute, we're depending on Zoom, for example, not to, suddenly have us speak French, like out of nowhere. Like, and sometimes that doesn't resonate with people. And I just say, did you eat today? And if you don't grow all your own food, how many beings are actually involved? And, it's such an important sense to combat privilege because we feel we're so apart. But in
Mm.
truth, we're part of an interdependent system. And so I just usually use that as a kind of avenue, and even just to say, like, uh, how important it might be for oneself to think beyond their own personal circumstance, and um, recognize the situation. Actually, sooner or later, privilege is not going to hold up because
Yeah.
it is an interconnected system, and I have a feeling sooner rather than later. Um,
Yeah.
and, we'll all be facing something. So
Yes.
somebody asked a question in the chat about crying. They said uh, they find that they're crying a lot in their meditation. And I think I'll tell you a story about my own teacher, Sadhu Pandita, where I did my first experience of practicing with him was in 1984 when we brought him to Barry to the Insight Meditation Society to lead a 3-month retreat. And not long before that retreat, one of my friends had died, and very difficult circumstances. And so there I was sitting with U Pandita for the first time, never having met him before. And he turned out to be like a very intense, demanding, fierce kind of teacher. And we were meeting with him 6 days a week, just for these very short meetings called interviews to describe our experience and to get some feedback from him. So I had been thinking a lot about my friend and his death. And I went in to see Pandita, and I was very reluctant to talk to him about it. I'd never met him before. He was, you know, from another culture. He was a monk. I didn't know how he would take to my emotional state, And so finally I told him, I've been thinking about my friend a lot. And he said, "Are you feeling very sad?" And I said, "Yes." And then he said, "Are you crying?" And I thought, uh-oh, I've got to tell him now that I'm crying and he's going to think less of me. I don't know. And so I said, "Just a little bit. I'm just crying a little bit." And he kind of shook his head dolefully and he said, "Every time you cry, you should cry your heart out. That way you'll get the best release." You could have knocked me over. I thought, whoa, that was a surprise. But he was just looking for the authenticity of my experience. And that's what is important. How we hold it. You don't have to say this is all I'll ever feel or I'm the only one or the things we tend to say, but the genuine experience of a painful emotion is just what it is.
Okay, so just a note, we're running short on time, so please keep your questions brief, and we will now go to Princeton. Princeton, can you unmute? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. I have a question about destructive emotions because I offer love to all sentient beings, but underneath it all, I just feel like because I've been hurt a lot, I've been made fun of, ridiculed by a lot of different people in my life because I suffer from mental health issues, which causes a lot of odd behavior that I do. So, what should I do about these destructive or these subconscious emotions of fear and hatred?
I think, first of all, everyone needs to find their tribe. There are people who have a genuine sense of community without exclusion and without bias, and everybody is suffering in some way or another, but the kind of predominant culture doesn't let us admit it. And you reminded me of, on that level, you know, um, a woman came to see me once who'd had like this terrible tragedy in her family, maybe 6 months before. And she said to me, "My friends are all kind of impatient with me, like, get over it already." And believe me, this was not a 6 month problem. And then she said, "My friends all have golden lives. Nothing ever goes wrong for them. So now I'm like a symbol of life gone awry, and I make them very uncomfortable." So what I found myself saying to her, just kind of blurting out, was, "I think you need new friends." And then I said, I apologized to all my friends who were on here. I said, "You should meet my friends. They're all a wreck." Like, you're not really, all a wreck, but there can be an honesty about our vulnerability, and I think that's really important. These emotions are natural, the fear, the anger. Uh, it's almost inevitable. The question is not to berate yourself or put yourself down for feeling them, but can you hold them in such a way so that you find a greater balance? And I'm not saying this is easy, but it's really important. Like, usually we have a strong emotion come up and we do one of two things. We fall into it, it overwhelms us, it takes us over, it defines us, it defines our choices and our actions. The other extreme is we're ashamed of what we're feeling and we hate it and we try to deny it, we try to push it away. And both are paths to greater suffering. So we're trying to find that place in the middle, which is what mindfulness is sometimes described as, the place in the middle where we can admit, yes, there's hatred, yes, there's fear, and hold it in a different way so that we recognize it honestly, we feel the pain of it instead of calling it bad. For example, we're kind to ourselves anyway, and we kind of navigate as best we can so we don't let it just completely take over. And at the same time, we're not pushing it away. And that's a skill, you know, it's like doing it over time again and again and again and again. And some things, of course, are harder than others, but I really do believe we have the capacity to develop that skill.
Sharon, do you have time for a few more, or I know
Yeah,
you
I
always
do.
have a tight schedule?
do.
Okay, so we can go a bit over so others can share. Thank you, Princeton. Belinda, can you unmute?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Sharon. I've appreciated your work for years. I keep thinking of Goenka when you mentioned Goenka saying, start the game, you know, and that has motivated me so often in life, just that feeling. And I think we're all in that place right now. You know, those of us who are activists are saying, I'm done. I can't keep doing this. I'm exhausted. It's fruitless. And then I hear his voice, start again, start again. And on that note, too, I think about the children of Gaza. You know, we can learn so much from children. I saw a little video where some children were saying, when my legs grow out, and then what they were going to do. I'm sorry, I cry every time I think of that. But that innocence. And so my question is, Sharon, so much of what Jesus said, so much of what the Stoics said is all from the suttas. It's all from the Buddha. So with Jesus's words about be like the children, is there something in the suttas where Buddha says be like the children in some other terms?
You know, I don't know that there's something like that per se. They do say, I had heard this from U Pandita, actually, who's a very traditional kind of teacher, that when the Buddha spoke, he spoke so simply that even a 7-year-old could understand him, and that partly as a consequence of that, he had many fully enlightened 7-year-old disciples. You know, so sometimes I look at the teachings and they do seem like a little simplistic even, you know, and then I remind myself, oh yeah, even a 7-year-old, that was the point. So I don't know, but it's an interesting question. It'd be worth looking up, you know, his actual words.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Belinda. Sharon, maybe one more. I know you're
Sure.
quite busy, so we'll do one more.
You know what?
Jeff?
You can bring me back just for
Yeah, we will bring you back. I mean, there are a lot of people here today, so I'm sure a lot of people are really, and from the chat, I can see so many people are grateful to you, as are we. Jeff, why don't you unmute? And that'll be our last question. My apologies to the others.
Wow, thank you. Now I feel extra pressure. It was the last question, and it better be good. Thank you so much for doing this, Sharon, and thank you so much for hosting this tricycle and making it available, free of charge. It's been such a blessing. Um, I've been feeling so much of like this add-on, I guess, of condemnation of like, seasons like this are why we practice, and this sense of like feeling like I'm scoring a C in real time. And that sense of like, shouldn't I be further along and responding more skillfully to this all? Um, I guess just any feedback about that. And then the other thing is I've just had such a sense of like lack of clarity about what I'm feeling other than crap. Like just such a heaviness, and I can't unfold what's what. And that's uncomfortable and something, frankly, I'm not really like used to. So any feedback on that? Thank you so much.
Uh, First, I want to praise you. I think a C is a pretty good grade. And, you know, honestly, in some very difficult times. And there's so much about practice that I find I only understand what happened looking back, you know, that it's sometimes hard to tell at the time that anything good is happening. But always when I look back, I think, oh, yeah, that was important, you know. And so even sitting with that feeling of heaviness and the murkiness and not knowing what you feel, I think is really important, because the almost like predominant message we get is distract yourself from that, you know, do anything,
Mm.
do something reckless, do something wild, whatever it's going to take to not sit with that feeling, you know, and acknowledge it. And everything we do that allows us to be present no matter what is happening, and be kind to ourselves no matter what is happening is crucially important. And it is planting a seed that we may not see at the time what's happening, but it absolutely is onward leading. And someone asked in the chat, what's the difference between mindfulness meditation and insight meditation? And they're actually the same thing. Mindfulness is just the active ingredient in insight meditation. And you know, sometimes we get confused and we don't realize the ultimate goal is insight. It's not just enjoying what's going on, you know, which we can do if we're more mindful, but it's the learning that happens. This is where you know, this is what's causing more suffering. This is what's freeing me even in the midst of difficulty. Look at that. I thought loving kindness, say toward myself, is so stupid and so weak. Look at that. Look at what happens. I thought vengefulness and endless fantasies of revenge were what made me strong. Look at that. Look at how limiting they are. Look at how painful they are. And it's through paying attention that we come to see for ourselves all these things and have a real sense of a path going forward.
Thank you so much.
Jeff, in case you're wondering, Sunny Thompson writes, perfect last question, Jeff. Our hearts all share it. So that's an A plus. Okay.
Thank you so much.
All
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
C
Sharon,
plus
thanks.
A plus equals what?
So Sharon, thanks for taking, spending the extra time with us. That's really generous of you as always. And yes, Sharon will be back. You heard her say it yourself, so we'll hold her to that. And thank you, Sharon, and thanks to all of you who joined us. We'll see you next time. Just a reminder, Tricycle is a nonprofit. If you'd like to donate, please visit tricycle.org/donate. If you'd like to explore Sharon's teachings further or read her work, we've provided links in the chat. So we'll just hold on a few seconds so you can go to the chat and see Sharon's work if you're unfamiliar with it, although I imagine most of you are. But thanks again, Sharon, and thanks everybody. Hang in there.
Yeah, thank you all.